viewers, welcome to the press conference for Le Mans 66, a James Mangold film. And without further ado, let me please introduce to you Mr. Christian Bale. James Mangold, major cast with family director. Welcome to Paris. And of course, last but not least, Matt Damon as Carol Shelby. Well, welcome to Paris, and thank you for bringing Le Mans to us, so to speak.
Thank you.
I mean, I know you probably expect my first question to be about basically what attracted you to the script, the story, the characters, but no, because the film stayed so much with me when I saw it, unexpectedly so, I must say, that I was wondering, in a way, how powerful was the experience to each of you, thinking about it with a sort of retrospect.
Oh, not at all. I mean, no, I'm kidding. It was powerful. It was. I don't think power would be the word I felt making the movie. I think it's the challenge of making the film is, at least for the director every day, is a monumental set of challenges every day that you're not sure if you can do or whether you'll accomplish. But the feeling making the movie was camaraderie. I mean, the thing that I think that came through making the film, that is in the film, is that these guys who I've known a long time, that the crew I've worked with a long time, that we're all friends, and that if there's anything I think that came through in the movie that was most important to me was the feeling of friendship, of camaraderie, of accomplishing something together. You know.
What about you, Matt Damon, Christian Bale?
I think there's a definite shared obsession between these characters in having that common purpose. They live life in a very raw manner. I mean, literally not knowing if they were going to get out of the car, and that made them incredibly alive. And so it transcended the whole notion of just being a racing movie. But it is this story about friendship, told at 200 miles an hour.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I think I agree. The way in for me definitely was about, as Jim was alluding to, because I'm not a car person, and I don't think any of us are particularly car people, but we do spend our lives collaborating creatively with groups of people and trying to make things together, and so that was very relatable. And I think Jim made something that's a lot more than a car movie. Obviously, I don't think any of us would have done it without. And also, I mean, in terms of a lot of your problems as an actor get solved when you have a director like this. Steven Soderbergh once described directing to me as making a giant mosaic the size of a city block from 1.5 inches away. And they have to keep so many things in their head and understand every moment, what specific moment, what place it has in the film, and keep the giant picture. So any notes that he would give us or adjustments were so specific because he knew exactly what he needed to tell the story.
Question here. First question here, please.
Bonjour. Dans ce que vous montrez dans le film, la quête du Mans par Ford ressemble beaucoup à la quête de la Lune par la NASA à la même époque. J'aimerais savoir si vous avez l'impression d'avoir fait un film d'astronaute sur la route. Et corollairement, j'aimerais savoir quelle était la dimension symbolique qu'avait pour vous Le Mans, la course du Mans, personnellement. Merci.
All right.
I think that's yours. What is the question?
Oh, you haven't put okay.
Oh,
Well, no. The quest by Ford, like to win Le Mans, was very much like the quest that NASA had at the same time for the moon, so to speak. Did you feel while making the film to be like a bit like astronauts on the road, quote? And did you give Le Mans, what was to you Le Mans symbolical dimension, or maybe metaphorical dimension?
Well, I'll volunteer that I don't think I think Ford's mission to win Le Mans was a mission to prove something about themselves. It wasn't pure, meaning it wasn't like a racer's need to win, it was a corporation's need to win. which is different, you know. But maybe the race to the moon in the 60s was also kind of corporate in the sense that we were competing with the Russians, and that it wasn't as much about getting to the moon or getting to the moon first. And I think that the movie tries to touch upon that. I think the effort to win a race is perhaps only pure for the racers themselves, not the teams or the companies that are sponsoring.
Question here.
Bonjour, j'ai une question pour les deux acteurs. On sait depuis 20 ans à peu près quels acteurs vous êtes, le point de perfection que vous avez atteint dans votre travail. Je voulais savoir si vous aviez la sensation encore d'apprendre des choses sur les tournages et si sur ce tournage spécifiquement vous aviez appris quelque chose l'un de l'autre.
Well, it's a question for both Matt and Christian. I mean, obviously, for the last 20 years, we've known what perfectionists you are as actors. And the gentleman was wondering if you still had the feeling that you could learn something on film sets, and also if specifically on this film set, you learn things about each other.
You always do, every single film, and I never trained, and so I always feel like every single job I take, I'm starting right from scratch. I don't like to imagine myself as having any particular technique or a bag of tricks or whatever that I fall back on, and I think that's what keeps me excited about it each and every time, is that it's a total reinvention. And there's also that fear about, I really don't know what I'm doing, you know, I've got to figure this one out. And I guess it's similar to, you know, when you haven't gone to college, you know, whatever, you feel sort of, I'm surrounded by a room of people who all went to college, they're all smarter, they're all more educated than me. Similarly, I feel like, each time I do a film, I'm surrounded by people who really know what they're doing, I'm just kind of bullshitting my way through it. But that creates a nice creativity, you know, in itself. And then you always find out a great deal about, you know, each other, because you're stuck in close quarters with a deadline, having to do something. It can be very intense, it can be bloody hilarious. Watching Jim with his crew is bloody hilarious. He's like, I mean, him and Faden Papamichael are kind of like Shelby and Miles. You know, they love each other dearly, have total respect for each other, come out with absolutely brilliant work, but bicker non-stop, and it's bloody... All we needed for inspiration was to watch Jim and Faden do that. But what you learn about each other is that they're obsessed as well, and it's lovely to work with people who are equally passionate and obsessive, and therefore they're not thin-skinned, you know, so that you can have passionate conversations about it and disagree without anybody getting offended and walking off, because there's no place for that in filmmaking.
Yeah, I'd definitely second that, and Jim creates an environment where everybody is throwing their ideas at him, and that's as it should be. You know, if you suggest 50 things and he accepts one of them, you've contributed something really important to the movie. And so I'd say I learn a ton on every movie I'm on. Every director works a little differently. It's always fascinating to watch great directors work. And I wanted to see Christian work in person since I first saw him on screen. And I was really blown away. It's funny that you talk about being at all insecure in your process, because what struck me was how, first of all, it's very generous. Actors can be selfish or generous in their process but his is incredibly generous and helpful to all the actors around him. But when you get to work and see him, he'll never tell you this, but you realize that you can just look at him and see the thousands of hours that have gone into getting him to that point right there, and yet he's still completely free and available moment to moment, and it was just awesome working with him.
Question là-bas.
Pour approfondir la question, justement, les deux pilotes ont le même, c'est pour les acteurs, hein, les deux pilotes ont la même façon d'aborder leur travail. Et vous, est-ce que vous travaillez de façon identique ou de façon différente? Comment vous avez abordé votre travail? Et je voudrais savoir quel est votre rapport aux voitures. Est-ce que vous aimez les voitures puissantes ou pépères? Alors,
Les différences, enfin, comment ils ont abordé leur rôle, c'est ça?
est-ce qu'ils ont la même
La
façon
même
d'aborder
technique,
la
c'est-
technique
c'est
comme
ça.
les pilotes ou est-ce qu'ils ont des
Oui.
vraiment différents?
There's a question I made a bit of comparison about with pilots and whatever. Do you as actors also have, like pilots in a way, certain methods of acting and relating and bonding on screen?
I think the methodology certainly involves a lot of research and a lot of work beforehand, so that you're centered in a way when you're making when you're actually doing it, that it's grounded in something that it also has a flexibility to it, because it can change and be different from take to take or moment to moment, and you'll have a lot more flexibility if you've put in a lot of work beforehand. It's not something you just show up and do.
I'm assuming you don't show up and do it either like that. So it's also a question for you. Your method, I mean, you don't arrive at...
No,
you're
had
ready
he
as a-
tried to show up and do it, he would have arrived like Dick Cheney at 240 pounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a big stretch from Dick Cheney, I must say. And the second part of the question was, yes, you wanted to answer? It's a question about your relationship to cars. And you said earlier, you, Matt, and you, that you weren't that much of car fans, really. But the question is for the three of you. I mean, now, what kind of cars do you like? Do you like the big ones, the fast ones, now that you've been sort of part of this world, thanks to James?
Well, I think one thing, just before getting to what cars we all love, I think one thing that Jim did so well is that you don't have to love cars to be able to understand and associate with this movie. The cars are the vehicles by which these men live, you know, at their peaks, you know, and to see people so alive and how much that means to them. But Jim's done it in a very relatable way. I like a good pickup truck.
All right. What about you, James? What is the kind of car you like?
I have a Land Rover that I take shopping. It's very fun.
No, you got bitten by the bug, and you
I
got
got
a faster one.
I got a little faster one too. But I'm not. Cars are not. It's not all about cars for me either. But I do think cars are interesting to all of us. Like when people say, "Are you into cars?" It means, "Are you into racing?" I think. But in a way, the entire world is into cars. That the entire century has been defined by what cars brought each of us, which is that independence of movement. You know, that the car was this way, that every man and woman had their own horse and buggy and could go wherever they wanted to go. It was a kind of and at least the affordable cars provided that for everyone, and that is a big part of how cars have changed our world. They become our identity. I mean, I always notice on the freeway that there will be someone cutting in front of many other drivers, you know, on an exit, like sticking their car out. And I'll come up later alongside and say, "Who is this rude bastard?" And I will see like a little old lady. And I was like, and it's like, well, when she's inside a steel box, she's a different person than she would be if she was at the post office. So if cars allow us to all become something else, they're a kind of mask or an extension of ourselves. I mean, there's all sorts of interesting ways that cars have changed who we are, and certainly even by the mid-60s, we're also kind of had it giantly changed how we relate to technology and freedom.
What about you, your sort of ideal car, the car you drove? What is your now perception of cars?
I have a Tesla. My answer is not at all as philosophical as Jim's.
Well, it's an honest, so right, that's what we're looking for. Question. Voilà.
Hi guys, first thank you very much for the movie, I thought it was brilliant. I was wondering how did knowing the fate of Shelby American and Ken Morris and how they're going to be robbed of that victory impacted your respective performances?
That finish of Le Mans '66, I think, could have been an entire film by itself, couldn't it? Like you could do it to truly tell the story of all of the different complications and misunderstandings and disagreements and emotions of what happened right there would take 3-4 hours. And we discussed that about, well, We try to get, as we do with the characters, to get the essence of what truly that signified, without it becoming a historical document. But it's an incredible moment, you know, because for Ken, you know, he's a purist, and for him to consider taking your foot off the gas in the slightest is absolute anathema. That's not racing at all. So why would he do it? You know, he had achieved perhaps this perfect lap, etc. But it comes back to what ultimately the film is about friendship. He did it because of recognizing the sacrifices that Shelby had made for him, but without knowing the consequences about what was going to happen afterwards. And that is a fascinating story, that by itself. You know, yeah.
And I think we talked to Charlie Agapiu, who was he was the youngest person on the pit crew, and he was there for all of it. And he said that it haunted Shelby. Because they really did have an expectation that, even slowing Ken down, they did have an expectation that once it was announced that he came in second, they still thought they were going to come back and win next year, and they did. They won 3 more years in a row. That car that they built was incredible, and I asked Charlie, you know, how certain were you when you went to Le Mans in '66 that you were going to win? And he said, we'd won Sebring, we'd won Daytona. We were 100% certain that if the car didn't break, nothing could keep up with us. That car was just a thug. It was just a great car, and so I think the expectation was, as painful as it was for Ken, I think the expectation was that the next year he was just going to come back and win. But it was, I think, unacceptable to Ford to have Ken win the Triple Crown, because then the story, all of these millions of dollars that they put into this program to promote their cars so that people would buy their cars would be overshadowed by the brilliance of this driver, and then that would become the story, or the story would at least become bifurcated. And I think that they made the decision that, like, we can't have that happen.